It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. So, Craig, the good news for Joe Biden over the last couple of days is the Senate parliamentarian has ruled that his $2 trillion infrastructure slash jobs bill could avoid a filibuster by using a somewhat complex reconciliation process. That pathway only requires 50 votes rather than a supermajority of 60. But the bad news is that the new administration doesn't seem to have those 50 Democratic votes to pass that bill, which includes a major hike in corporate taxes. Both Joe Manchin of West Virginia and John Warner of Virginia have come out against that revenue part of the plan already. So this doesn't look like Biden is in a position of strength, even within his own party. What's your take?
Very closely divided. He has a Senate that clearly has members in it that want to be able to negotiate with him. And I suspect that what's going on is that they're laying the groundwork for that negotiation. The president said just the other night that he's willing to have a negotiation, and I think that's a natural thing. I'm a little bit surprised. I think Joe Manchin is probably going to get reined in a little bit by members of his own party, just because he's been so outspoken, and I would suspect they don't want him standing in the way of what they see as progress. So I don't know whether they can win over Republican votes. Clearly, the Republicans have taken the position this is a bridge too far, so to speak. But at the end of the day, as we were talking last week, many of these projects are projects that Republicans can support. The people back in their states and their districts would want supported. And so I suspect it'll be a pretty complex negotiation, but in the end, they will get something. Maybe not as much as they're putting forward, but they'll get something.
Al, what's your take?
My take is that everybody ought to relax. The cable news networks, they're the tabloids of the 21st century, have a bad case of shiny object syndrome. They obsess over every statement every senator makes, no matter what it is, and particularly when it opposes the president's plan. But they've apparently never heard, as Craig just said, of negotiation and tactics and compromise. For me, Biden's doing just fine. He came in, said he was going to deal with the pandemic. He's vaccinating the country at an incredible rate. The economy's begun to really rebound with an incredible jobs report for March. He got his COVID rescue package through in almost record time. And I think this plan is going to be very popular, his economic recovery infrastructure plan. And I think it'll even have support among Republicans. But to me, most important, he's brought civility back to the discussions in the political debate. So he's doing fine. He wants to raise corporate taxes, and especially, and what he really wants to do, there's a great story in the New York Times this morning about this. He wants to stop corporations from avoiding taxes altogether, like Amazon, even though they're pretty prosperous. And he wants to stop them using, like Apple and Bristol Myers Squibb, from having their accountants figure out how to shift all their profits to places to countries that have less corporate income tax, so they don't have to pay American tax rates. My guess is, in the end, that's going to be pretty popular with voters. But there's going to be a lot of opposition. We have a broad party. Goes from Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders to Joe Manchin and Mark Warner. And, so there's going to be differences. There were differences on the rescue plan. They got worked out. As Craig said, Biden said yesterday, debate is welcome, compromise is inevitable, changes are certain. And then he said, inaction is not an option. So they're going to get something. They'll figure it out. The country's infrastructure is long, the rebuilding of it is long overdue. And there are a lot of important investments in this plan to build the infrastructure of the future, of the economy of the future. And we have to make those if we want to continue to be a prosperous country and we want a strong middle class. So I think we'll work it out. We'll figure out a way to pay for it or not, but we'll certainly figure out how to do this. And in the end, he's not going to get everything he wants, and maybe everything in this bill that shouldn't be passed, but he'll get a lot of it.
You know, Dave, this takes me back to an episode many years ago. Ronald Reagan was governor, and he told the democratically led state legislature that his feet were absolutely on concrete in terms of a welfare reform package, and he would not budge. And once they sat down at the bargaining table and they came to some compromises, and everybody got something of what they wanted, but not everything of what they wanted, the measure passed. And I think it might have been Willie Brown, but it was the Democratic legislature presented then Governor Reagan with a slab of concrete and 2 brown shoes. So you know, even Ronald Reagan could find a way to make a deal in those days.
You know, the other thing to realize is Joe Manchin, who's a personal friend of mine, is a very good and smart man. And he represents a state where no other Democrat would have a prayer of getting elected. He's going to be with Democrats on most things, but he's got to protect enough of his flank so he can get reelected. I mean, I've known him since he was governor. He was a 70% approval governor. And I always used to say, and I still believe this, in a lot of states, there's a tax on Democrats for running as for Senate or federal office. And, you know, he barely got by last time. And no other, Trump won his state by what, 40 points? So they'll find a way to accommodate him, and he's a decent man. He wants to get infrastructure built. So we'll make a deal.
Al, staying with you, the other thing that caught my eye the other day was the number of corporations that were going public in their opposition to Georgia's new voting laws, including Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said that it was a stupid thing for the corporations to get involved. Still, the GOP seems to be just fine in those same corporations making political contributions. So to bring back a fond memory of Mitt Romney in the 2012 election, are corporations people too?
As you said, they've gotten a lot of, the Republicans have stocked their coffers with money from corporate America. And my guess is if Mitch wants to be majority leader again, he probably will not turn his back on the corporations or call them stupid anymore. But I think there's a larger problem here, and that is that the Republicans basically have given their kingdom, the keys to their kingdom away to Donald Trump, and he dominates the party, and they made that decision to make him their leader. And that's forced them to resort to what I would call a big mistake to cover up his big lie that there was a lot of fraud in the election. And that mistake is to come basically come out on the side of voter suppression. And rather than to try to strengthen our democracy that's changed in our country, that's changing with rapidly changing demographics, they've decided to go the other way and make it harder for new constituencies to vote. I think that's a mistake. I want to say, first of all, the rhetoric gets overheated on both sides on this issue. I mean, the Georgia law probably isn't as bad as a lot of people on my side say it is, but there's no question about the intent. The intent is to make it harder for minorities to vote. And that's been the intent of the Republicans. I mean, look at all the court suits, look at all this legislation. And I think personally, I think it's a mistake because they've essentially chosen to try to protect the past rather than figure out how to conquer the future. And that's always a mistake. And in this case, it's a particular mistake because the Republicans have a chance to do well among the fastest growing constituency in the electorate, which are Hispanics. And the thing that's holding them back really is that they've told Hispanics, we don't want you to vote for us. If they just became welcoming, and one of the ways you become welcoming is to invite them to vote, they might be able to make real gains, and they could have won the, basically without Trump, they could have won the Senate. They would probably held the Senate, and they may have even won the House last time. So the big mistake they're making is going the voter suppression route and handing the keys to their kingdom to Donald Trump.
Craig, do you see it the same way?
I pretty much agree. I do think that what Republicans have to realize is that they're a declining number or percentage of the population, and companies that are selling products across America are simply not going to sit back when a large majority of their customers reject some of the rhetoric and some of the approaches that some Republicans are taking. So I thought it was quite interesting that these companies found their voice and stepped up and said, we object to this. And of course, once one did, several did. And I don't think we're through seeing this. I think that one kind of way to shape public policy is to vote with your pocketbook, and customers may just look for companies that are taking a responsible position here. They've done that for a long time on environmental issues. And so with all due respect to Senator McConnell, it's hardly new that companies stake out public policy positions and step up and state what they stand for. They just haven't been given quite the array of opportunities that the Republicans are giving them these days. But I suspect we're in for more of this, and it ought to be a wake-up call to certainly to the moderate Republicans that you may be losing your hold on some very important contributors. They will, and particularly once the country starts going back to holding, meetings and conventions and marketing discussions and all of that, people have choices, and they're going to choose areas that are not going to create problems for them simply by showing up.
Corporations, as Craig said, need to sell their products, and they're looking to the future market, not the past. And the problem that we have now, and this is really, a problem of any party that's been in power for a while, as the Republicans have, they always want to preserve that. And that means looking backward instead of looking ahead. So corporations might, just by their market research, have a much greater influence on the future of our politics than maybe even they had with their money, which is sort of interesting. The other big controversial thing is the baseball all-star game pulling out of Atlanta and going to Denver. And, a lot of people think that may have been precipitous, especially since Rob Manfred is a member of Augusta, where the Masters is this week, and where I gather they're going to protest today. And he hadn't pulled out of that, but I think what he was thinking ahead is what would happen if they have an all-star game and players didn't show up.
Hey, listen, we have to leave it there.
Okay.
Craig Fuller, Al Fromm, thanks so much.